You're listening to the Decidedly podcast with Sanger Smith and Sean Smith. Our mission is to help business owners like you defeat bad decision-making so you can improve your health, wealth, and relationships. We do this by digging deep into the stories and expertise of our guests and distilling their knowledge into actionable wisdom for you to carry into your life and business. If you're new to the show, welcome. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of our weekly episodes. If you prefer to watch this week's episode, head on over to YouTube for the full video. Now, let's get into this week's episode and defeat bad decision-making in your life and business.
In 2010, I was 15 on spring break. My dad took me to Santa Fe, New Mexico for my first ski trip. It was my dad, me, and my dad's dad, my grandpa. We went to Santa Fe. I'd never skied before. We get out to the parking lot. You got to drive up to the mountain in Santa Fe. They don't have like a resort or anything. So we drive up, spend all morning driving up the mountain. We get there, get out of the car, go to the ski rental place, grab the skis and the boots, walk over to the ski lift. And he shows me how to step into the skis, put them on my feet. And he goes, okay, follow me, just push. And we're going to get on these, this chair lift. When it gets behind you, make sure, sit down on it. Otherwise, you're just going to get pushed off. I go, okay. So it comes behind me, it sits down. And it's taking me up the mountain. And we're probably about halfway up the run on the ski lift before I go, hey, Dad, you didn't teach me how to ski. And he goes, yeah. So remember how we water ski back home in Texas? I go, yeah. He goes, you know how when you want to turn, you lift your toes and you turn? I go, yeah. He goes, snow skiing is the opposite. You're going to lift your heels instead of your toes. I go, that's it? He goes, yeah, you'll be fine. And so we get to the top and I try to implement this very minimal advice that he's given me. It does not work. I fall 100 times. I mean, just over and over and over and over. I had no choice. We're here. There's nothing to do but ski. So I get back on the lift. I go up. I fall a bunch of times all the way down the mountain. And I just do that over and over all day, cursing my dad basically the whole time. Well, long story short, by the end of the trip, I'm doing black diamond runs. Like I'm feeling fine. I've totally learned how to ski. I originally was ticked off at my dad, who didn't really teach me that much, but he put me in a position where I had nothing to do but to try. And that was maybe the most valuable thing that he could have done for me and let me learn how to ski so much quicker than I think I would have otherwise. Speaking of learning how to do something, just getting out there and doing it instead of sitting around thinking about it, and the role that a father plays in preparing you to learn, develop, and grow into manhood. Our guest today, Ryan Michler, covers all of those topics. Ryan spends his time today helping men challenge themselves to reject the complacency of their life, reclaim clarity, and lead their home, business, and their communities. He's the founder of the Order of Man. We get in deep into how to balance as a verb, not a noun, how to become a man, how to learn, how to grow, how to develop, and he shares some funny stories along the way. So that sounds like you, whether you had a dad teach you everything you ever needed to know or you didn't. I think you'll get something out of the podcast today. My name is Sanger Smith, and this is Decidedly. Well, thanks for being here, Ryan, and thanks for being patient with our studio setup. You do this for 5 years, and we still have not figured out the technology issues.
Yeah, no, it's no problem. That's how it goes. I've been doing it for a while, too, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, but we make it work.
Yeah, there's some skills that my dad taught me growing up, and they were all, I would say almost all, in my mind. Like he tried to teach me how to build a bench with some wood from Home Depot or something. Never took. He wasn't really into that either. But when it comes to fixing things, particularly technology, he definitely never taught me that either. Your experience You never had a dad around when you were younger teaching you, how to work on the car, how to hunt and fish. At what point in your life did you realize that was something that you were missing, um, and that you wanted to address its absence?
I mean, I think when I was growing up, and I want to be clear too. I mean, my dad was in the picture. And we had a relationship. He didn't. My mom and him split when I was young. I was 3 years old, and then I had some other stepfathers come into my life who weren't great examples, but there were moments, and it was those little brief moments. My one of my stepfathers built cabinets, and so I'd go work in his cabinet shop, and we would work on Pinewood Derby cars together, and we'd go to sprint car races together. And so there were moments that were good. Another stepfather that I had was really involved with my sports and teaching me how to play sports. He was very athletic, and so he was involved in that for me. But again, not real present, not permanent, and again, glimpses of what it meant, I think, at this point to be a good father. But I don't really think when you're in it, any different. I would see, for example, my friends in sports and at school, and those who had fathers who were completely present and engaged. I was always a little bit envious of that, but I didn't really know any different. And it really wasn't until I got out of high school and I ended up joining the military and just on my own personal journey with being a father myself and having kids and starting businesses that I realized, oh man, I could have used a lot of guidance and direction when I was younger. But it is interesting as I talk with men, a lot of them feel the exact same way. I didn't have a dad around, or I didn't learn this. What do I need to do? Well, you're an adult. Learn it now. And what's great about that is that you can actually act as a blank slate. You talked about all of that stuff your dad taught you being in your mind. You're not a blank slate. But when it comes to learning what it means to be a man, if you never got that role model, you're not that far behind. You have an opportunity to do exactly what you want to do. So you're in a good position.
Yeah, I think there's something about manhood that makes it difficult to acknowledge a lack of knowledge. There, in my experience as an advisor, as an investment advisor, very anecdotally, women are a lot more comfortable telling me, "Oh, I have no idea how that works." Like, "Oh, mutual funds? Never heard of them." A lot of times I see men who I go, "Hey, do you know how this works? Do you know what this is?" And they clearly don't, but they almost want to, like a point of pride, want to pretend that they do. And I think for a man who maybe wasn't taught how to be a man or how to be a father, that's got to be the worst thing to admit that you don't know how to do.
Well, what's funny about that, you're not wrong, but what's funny about that is nobody knows how to do it. We're all just trying to figure it out on the fly. And I might have a few things figured out that I might do better than another man, and another man might have some things figured out that they do better than me. So I think if we all just decide, hey, I can learn wherever I am, I can learn and I can grow. But I think you're right. There is this really interesting thing that happens in culture almost at a subconscious level where if a man doesn't understand finances, for example, and I owned a registered investment advisory firm before I started this movement, so I'm a little bit familiar with the world.
Well, I would say very, if you...
Well, yeah, sure. But it's been 10 years. So things change all the time, regulation and all of that as well. But yeah, if a guy doesn't know how to use finances or know about his finances or how money works or the stock market works, then he's mocked for not knowing. He's ridiculed for not, oh, you should already know how to do that. But then, interestingly enough, if a guy goes out and tries to learn, let's say he hires an advisor or he enrolls in a course or goes to a conference, then he's mocked for trying to figure it out. Well, you should already know that. So it's a bit of a catch-22 for a guy. You should already know how to do it or we'll make fun of you. And if you don't know how to do it and actually try to go learn how to do it, people will make fun of you because you should already know how to do it. Guys are stuck. It's very interesting.
I've always thought that has something to do, maybe a lot of that is like just innate about men for some reason. It's in our DNA to know as leaders. But I think a lot of it's a consequence of our modern world where how we provide as men, most men it's with our brains. The majority of careers for men in America are the majority of jobs that we're going, and because of my knowledge, I am able to perform this role, and now I get paid. We don't have a generation of coal miners anymore. Obviously, those things still exist, but that's not the most common. Most people working in, some white collar job. I show up, I translate my knowledge onto the spreadsheet or onto the PowerPoint or wherever it is, and that's how I know. And that's how I get paid, and that's how I provide for my family. So when I don't know, it's like, oh my gosh, that's threatening this innate desire that I have to, as a man, provide for myself and my family. And so I see that a lot. I used to get so self-conscious about, I always understood money because my dad was an advisor too, but I never understood cars. Like he never taught me how to even, change a tire. And I would get so self-conscious around guys that were like really, amateur mechanics, like always fixing up something. And I couldn't just admit to them, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And they can all see it. It's like, that's the thing, when a man doesn't understand, all the other men know. When I finally realized I was being silly, I go, oh yeah, when I don't know something, it's so much better to just acknowledge that I don't know. It's like the power that other people may have had to mock me or ridicule me, it just totally went away.
Well, it's also cruelly ironic that I think our ego gets the better of us often.
Yeah.
And so we won't admit that I don't know about finances, or I don't know how to work on cars, or I don't know the rules to that sports game that we're watching, like whatever it is. And so we have these egos, and we do that to protect ourselves. We want to be part of the group. We want to be part of the team. We want to be accepted. We want to be valuable. We want to be acknowledged as valuable to other people. But ironically, not being humble actually makes you less capable of providing for yourself and the people that you have a responsibility for. So it's very interesting. It's very strange that it works out like that, but it does.
Was there a moment when you decided to change that about yourself, that ego, and say, hey, it's okay for me to admit that I don't know some things?
I actually don't feel like I'm not going to say I haven't been arrogant or egotistical or full of pride at points in my life, but for whatever reason, maybe that was instilled in me, maybe it's nature. I've never really been afraid of saying, I don't know how to do that. Can you show me? Or asking questions. I think that ideology of being curious has definitely developed when I started running a business, because I needed it to work. I remember early in my financial planning days, very early, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to talk with people. I didn't know how to get referrals. I didn't know how to make connections. I was floundering. And I got so frustrated. I was about to throw in the towel. And before I did that, there was a guy in my office, and his name was Jeremy. And Jeremy was a rock star. I mean, he was bringing in business, and I got into the financial game in 2008, 2009. So it was a horrible time to start a career in finances. And this guy was continuing to build his business. He was always one of the top producers in the office. And before I threw in the towel, I remember going to him and saying, hey man, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. You seem like you do. Can you show me a thing or two? And he's like, yeah, let's go to lunch. So him and I went to lunch, and we ended up partnering up. And what he said is, among other things, is that if we do this partnership, then any revenue you create, I'm going to have 50% of that. We're going to be equal partners. And I was a little taken back at first. I was like, well, 50%, I'm not even putting food on the table barely. I can't give you 50%. And he said, 50% of what I will help you create is better than 100% of what you're creating right now. I'm like, that's fair, because 100% of zero is still zero. Yeah. And so I ended up partnering with him, and he taught me what he knew, and he taught me how to talk with clients and get referrals and present concepts and all the things that he did. And I ended up growing that business to a very successful financial planning practice for a lot of reasons. But that was the catalyst, is being humble enough to say, I don't know what I'm doing. Help me. And I was forced to do it in that situation, because if I didn't, I was going to be out of a job and I didn't have any resources coming in from my family, my young family at the time.
So were you at a broker dealer or a wirehouse before you started the RIA?
Yeah, so I worked with a large insurance company, and they had a broker dealer associated with the insurance company. So it was Guardian Life Insurance and Park Avenue Securities. So I started my financial planning career more on the insurance side of things, and then over the course of 4 or so years, more into the investment arena, and then that's when I launched the RIA.
Yeah, that's a big leap to launch an RIA.
Oh yeah.
Was Jeremy involved at that point?
No, if I remember correctly, he stayed with the broker dealer. If I remember, it's like I said, it's been a while at this point, but if I remember correctly, he stayed. And the hard part about it, even more so, was that when I left with the insurance company I was working for at the time, is I didn't own that book of business. The company did. So when I left, I wasn't bringing any residual income with me. I was basically starting over financially from zero.
Yeah, that's a huge decision. What motivated that? Because most people, when they're at like a crossroads, hey, you built something up, you're successful, you're making things happen. You want to take it to the next step, you got to completely start over and go back to zero. Most people will not do that. What made you do that?
There was, I think I always had the insight of like wanting to own my own business, and in this case, my own book of business. I'm a marketer at heart, and it was frustrating because I felt like my hands were tied because of our compliance department. I wanted to start actually a podcast, and I wanted to put out marketing material, and I wanted to do radio shows, and I wanted to like get myself out there. And every time I had an idea, the compliance department was like, nope, nope, send me the script, can't do this, can't do that. And I get it, they're trying to protect the company, and I understand that, but that was frustrating for me. And at the time, I was running a little satellite office about 4 hours south of our main office, and it was just me in the satellite office 4 hours south. And I started to look into my compensation, and it was interesting because I was looking at the resources the organization was providing me at the time, which was a little bit of assistant work and a very small office space. And I started to look at the way that my revenue was being shared, and I realized, oh my gosh, I can make 100% of all of this and pay for a bigger office space and my own assistant and make more money. So that was really the catalyst for me starting to look at what I needed to do to make some changes with it.
I had a similar experience, Ryan. This was not the moment that I decided I needed to do something different, but I was part of an independent practice at a larger broker dealer. And so the broker dealer has they have their own compliance rules and everything. And I got a call on a Friday night at 10 p.m. Hey, we saw this article you wrote this morning. You want to be on Dr. Phil? We film at 8 a.m. on Monday. And I was like,
whoa.
Yes. Now the rules are, I got to go get that approved by compliance. And I was like, I can't. They're gonna ruin it for me. Like this is a lotto
shut
ticket
it down.
yeah, like they're gonna find something wrong with it. So I was like, I gotta just do it and hope that they don't get upset with me. And I think Morgan was working on it with me at the time. She was like, well, do we film it and then tell them? I'm like, I can't even do that because I'm sure that if I tell them, they're going to say, well, you got to tell them to do this, tell them to do that. And Dr. Phil's not listening to me, So I said, let's just air it and hope nobody notices. This comes on during the day. Everybody's at work. Okay. I was like, they're not going to know. The compliance people are at the office. Sure enough, it comes on 6 weeks later. The day it comes out, I get an email from our dedicated compliance officer who we always interacted with. She happened to take the day off to do some doctor's appointments, was sitting on her couch doing laundry and saw me on Dr. Phil. I was like, oh my gosh. But it's stuff like that. We're like, I don't have the autonomy. I have to switch it up. And it was a big step backwards, I went from making really great money. All my friends were jealous of me. And then I lost $100,000 my very first year of starting this company. I was like, that's a hit. We build it back. We're going. I'm very happy I made the decision. But was there anything deeper than understanding like, hey, there's things about my business, or was it also like factoring in your values and lifestyle? Because I imagine you had a family at that time. That's very difficult. I was doing this as a single guy.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, I'm not sure about the values necessarily. I don't even know if I was that aware of what that would even look like at the time. I am now, but not then. I think for me, it was this, I would just rather recreate the wheel knowing that I'm doing it on my own than just living under somebody else's thumb. And I know in a lot of ways you might say, well, that's dumb and that's stupid and just like follow the system. I've never been that kind of person. And I'm not a rebellious high risk taker either, but I just want to do it my way. I want to do it my way for my reasons, when I want to do it, how I want to do it, why I want to do it. And I don't want anybody to tell me what I can and can't do. It bothers me. And I don't know where that comes from, but it does.
What is interesting with big life decisions is that if you start asking for advice, did you ask anybody's advice before you did this? Did you say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Do you think I should do it?
Yeah.
Or did you just kind of know already?
No, I mean, I knew I was going to make some changes. I didn't know what those changes would look like, but I did start talking with other advisors who had made the leap, who had started with the same company or similar companies and had made changes. And I built good friendships with people in the industry. And I just saw the path that they were going. And I said, that seems interesting to me. I need to figure more out about that. And I made the decision, if I remember correctly, to do this, but I didn't leave probably for another, maybe it was like 6 to 9 months. I didn't leave.
Yeah.
And my thought process around that was, well, I need to learn this other side of the business because I know how to be a financial advisor, but I don't know how to run my books. I don't know how to hire people. I don't know how to train people. I don't know how to do any of that. So I spent a lot of time over the next 6 to 9 months learning the business side of it, not just the financial side of it.
Yeah, a lot of guys get stuck on that part. They're like, I'm a really good advisor. I can run my own shop, do my own thing. Like, oh, I didn't know I had to do all this.
Yeah. Well, it's that e-myth.
Yeah. I get fascinated by big life decisions when I see people ask their circle, like, hey, what should I do? Right? As if anyone can really answer that other than themselves. I have a friend of mine he's moving because he's getting married. And so he's looking for different jobs because he can't keep his current job. Got to move cities. He got 2 offers. One was a big corporation, work from home, good benefits. The other one, basically the same pay, but a small company, in person, probably going to work more hours, obviously don't have the work from home flexibility. And he's asked me about it. He's like, I don't really know what to do. And I said, well, what are you thinking? Because I'm not just going to sit there and go, well, this is what you should do. I mean, I know what I would pick, but I don't know what you should pick. So I'm asking him tons of questions. And eventually I said, well, what's holding you back from making a decision? Because everything he was saying was kind of leaning toward taking the job at the small company that's not work from home. I go, what's holding you back from making a decision? He goes, well, when I ask people for advice, all of the young people say, take the small company job. All of the old people say, take the big company job. I was like, that's fascinating. Yeah. And I said, well, I think that's a demonstration of simply a difference in values. All of these people that you're talking to in his circle uniquely, all the old people have worked at the same job forever at a big company. So if they tell you, hey, do something different than what I did, they're tacitly admitting, I screwed up my life or I have regrets. Yeah, and that's very difficult to grapple with. So they don't want to say that. And he goes, yeah, but I have a lot of young friends that have worked at the same company for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and they're not saying do that. And I go, yeah, because they haven't fully committed to that path yet. And they see something with this decision that they can admire, and they're allowed to admire it because admiring it does not mean that they've yet made the wrong decision. There's still time for them. It's the same way, like you look at a story of someone, we've had people on the podcast who've done like really cool things, travel across the world, you know, bicycle across the continent of Africa, whatever. When I go talk to my older family, they'll be like, oh, I heard that guy on the podcast. He sounds crazy. You know, he did this crazy thing. And then I talk to young people like, oh, I heard you talk to that guy who biked across Africa. That guy's badass. Like, yeah, there's this recognition that I'm allowed to appreciate this thing because there's still a glimmer of hope that I may tap into that virtue. If I let it go past, like, I almost can't recognize it to protect my own ego.
Well, I also think there's a couple things I think with this is too often most people, I believe most people would rather live vicariously through others.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we get so wrapped up in our sports teams. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with having a team that you like, but when a team that you're interested in wins the Super Bowl or whatever, you feel a little bit of that charge as if you actually had something to do with it. You don't, but you're trying to gather some sort of meaning and significance in things that you have nothing to do with. And the other side of it too is it's really easy to offer advice that could potentially be risky to others that you're not willing to do yourself. So
yeah, that's a very good point.
But I heard this quote one time, and I don't know if it completely applies, but it's kind of an interesting concept. And one of my mentors, early mentors in my financial planning practice, said, never take advice from someone who has a vested interest in you staying the same.
Oh, that's very good advice.
The reason I remember that we talked about this, we had this advisor who was considering leaving and starting his own company. And he asked advice from our boss. And our boss said, oh no, you shouldn't do that because here's the risk. Here's how hard it is. And I started thinking about this conversation that he was recalling to me. And I thought to myself, well, that's what the boss did. He did that.
Yeah.
And now he's not going to, you're a great producer for the agency. You make him a lot of income. And I'm not saying the guy's malicious by any means, but he has no reason to let you go do something else that is potentially in conflict with what he's doing, potentially taking clients with you, losing the revenue that you bring into the firm. So why would you ask that person for advice? But people do it all the time and expect that they can give them a genuine and honest answer. They can't. They're compromised.
He would have to have an extraordinary level of self-awareness and benevolence in order to be a good partner to that conversation, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Talking about sports reminded me something about your story. You kind of got to this point in your life, you realized all the guys around you are dabbling in things that were really not meaningful or significant, only wanting to talk about sports or politics or whatever, and not really focusing on something more meaningful. At what point did you notice that? And what was the thing that they were not focusing on that you realized you needed to focus on?
I remember this was probably, 2000, I don't know, 9 or 10, somewhere right in there. And I was kind of looking around at all of my friends. I was going through some things personally. I was looking around at all my friends, and I noticed that most of them were worried about like the next party or worrying about a sports team or the thing that they were doing that didn't seem interesting to me. And it was all very surface level stuff. And I didn't want to continue to have those conversations, man. I was like starting a family. I went through a separation in my marriage very early on. So that was something I was dealing with. I'm trying to start this financial planning practice and grow the business. Like I have real things I'm trying to do and goals and ambitions and desires. And there was like 3 people I remember, one in particular, who I thought that guy's got it figured out. And he was a friend. He lived down the road from me, and he was an insurance agent. He did mostly home and auto insurance. And I just thought that guy, I resonate with that guy. Like, he's a business owner. He's got goals. He's got a young family. He's driven. He's motivated. He's very fit. So I could tell he's disciplined. Like there was something about him in particular that I was just impressed by. And I'm like, man, I need to find more guys like that. And I started to actually, probably for the first time in my life, be a little bit more deliberate about who I spent my time with. And I wasn't mean and I didn't like cut people out of my life. I just stopped investing in certain people as much as I was before and spent more time with intentionality on the kind of men I wanted to be around.
Yeah, there's certain things that just, man, they're like black holes to your soul. They'll suck you in. I got sucked in to sports. I always loved sports when I was a little kid. I got sucked in really hard when I was at like the point of my life with the least amount of direction and clarity of my future, which was this period. I didn't go to college right after I graduated high school. I started the spring semester instead of the fall semester, like most people. So there was 6-8 months, however long, between the end of high school and the start of college. Everybody's gone. Everybody's at college. I'm alone. I'm working a temporary job. Obviously, I don't really see a future here. I know I'm going to be going to college, but that hadn't really kicked in. So I just got obsessed with Dallas Stars hockey. I spent my paycheck on tickets. I went to every home game. And I was just like, I would live for it. There's a game on Tuesday. There's a game on Tuesday. Sweet, sweet. Oh, yes, I can't wait. Wednesday sucked, dude. They didn't play on Wednesdays. They play on Thursdays. So Wednesdays were horrible. Oh my gosh, Thursday. Okay, finally I can go. And when they lost, it was devastating. When they won, I was over the moon for like 5 minutes. I would go to the game. I would come home from the game and watch the replay TiVo version of the game. That's how psycho I was with this. And once I like got out of it, got direction, I noticed as I got more and more purposeful in my life, I just had less room for that. I remember being young, I would go to the games with my dad. He's had season tickets to the Stars since like they were in Reunion Arena in the early 90s. And I would go and I'd be like, I know every single player. I know the fourth line guy that gets like 3 minutes a game. And I know where he's from, where he played junior hockey, all this stuff. And my dad would be like, dude, I know the captain and that's it. Who's the coach? What happened? We traded for that guy. I don't know. And I was like, how do you not care? I just couldn't understand why he didn't care. And we went to a game the other day. We're sitting next to each other. I look around. I'm like, half these guys, I've never heard of them in my life. And I turned to my dad. I remarked about that. I was like, oh, I understand. Like when you have something purposeful and meaningful in your life, it's very difficult to have time for things that are just not meaningful.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on with that. I do believe that every single person wants to have purpose in their life, but that's why they get sucked up into those things. You know, for example, sports, the people get sucked up into that. They're looking for purpose. They want belonging. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to feel like they're contributing in some way. But the reality is it's just not real.
Yeah. It's sugar cookies.
Yeah. Or, you know, another one I often see is men in pornography. It's like you're striving for connection. You're striving for intimacy. You want to feel valued. You want to feel loved, and you're not doing it in the real world. And so you're substituting it with this manufactured version of connection with a woman. And it feels good and it feels right momentarily, like the sugar cookie thing you were saying, but it's empty. But like those vices that we fall into, it's always because we're striving and looking for something that I think is good in life. We're just directing it at empty outlets.
There's speaking of that issue, there was a time in my early 20s where a couple of friends of mine, they like decided at the same time, oh, we're done with this. We're done with porn. And they got like super into being against it. So they had like all these like anti-porn t-shirts and stuff, and they would bring it up at parties. They'd be like,
oh, really?
What are you doing lately, Ryan? And be like, dude, I just quit porn like 6 months ago. Life's awesome. You don't really say that in public, but these are the kind of guys that they say those things in public. And when they told me about it, I was like, oh, well, obviously that's a good decision. Like, duh, you know, I'm 23 or whatever, but I still recognize, yeah, man, good for you. You should not do that. I was totally shocked at the amount of guys that they would talk, because I would see them do this. We'd be at the same party or the same group of friends or whatever, and they'd say, oh yeah, we quit this thing, And guys would go, that's stupid. Why would you do that? Why would you quit? This is awesome. And I was like, wait, it's one thing to think that. You're admitting publicly. You're now weirder than the guy who's admitting that he's quitting publicly by a large degree. You're very weird. What are you doing? And it was so many of my friends that would react that way. They go, oh, dude, no, why would I ever quit this? I mean, previously, it's not something I would ever talk about with my friend, but they were just so open about it. And I couldn't understand it, but it's because it sucks you in so deep in the same way that all these other things can, where you're looking for purpose and meaning. If I found an artificial purpose and meaning in my life, the last thing I want to hear is that it's artificial. Let me pretend, because I obviously tried to find something real and it wasn't working. So I found this artificial thing. At least let me maintain the illusion that it's real.
Yeah, I mean, I think what ends up happening when you get into these things is it just feels good and you're getting something from it. Even when you make bad decisions, you're getting something from that. Because if you weren't getting something from it, you wouldn't have done it. We're all self-interested. So if it's drinking, for example, and I struggled with alcohol abuse. That's a big issue that I've had to overcome. I was getting something from it. It allowed me the opportunity to unplug momentarily, and not be so, consumed with work or family or just my mind just running, racing all the time. And it felt really good, but inside it was killing me mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. But it was really hard to overcome because of the value or the benefit that I was getting from it. And I had to figure out how to get the benefit that I needed through healthier outlets. If I was trying to escape from life, the real question is not what kind of drink I should have, but what kind of life have I created if I have to escape from it? Or if I need to take time off because I'm stressed and overwhelmed, okay, then have like a healthy outlet like training or hunting or jujitsu or shooting or things that I do now.
Yeah. That's such a really profound recognition. What kind of life do I have if I have to escape from it? I haven't felt that way in a long time. I felt that way in college where I was like, oh, I hate this. The day-to-day of college was just miserable. Maybe for like the first couple of years of my working life, I was grinding, but I don't think I felt like I needed an escape from my life. And I haven't felt that way in a very long time, thankfully. Because I want my life to be awesome. When people, I interviewed a guy for a job a few weeks ago. He was kind of like, not really, he hadn't quite decided that he wanted to be an advisor, maybe. He's like, and he was open with that. He was like, I don't really know if I really want to be an advisor, but I want to at least explore what it would be like to work here. And he goes, so what's the work-life balance? And I said, oh, that's a stupid concept and I don't agree with it. He was like, huh? I said, why would you separate work and life? Life is everything. Like, work is a part of life. If you feel the need to separate it, I think you're treating your work and your life incorrectly.
Yeah. I mean, I talk with guys all the time about creating integrated lives. When my kids all know what I do, they all are a big part of what I do. I talk with them about concepts or things I've learned, or maybe I had Patrick Renna, he's Ham from Sandlot. He was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, hey, will you just record a quick video for my kids and say hi to them? He's like, yeah, I'd love to do that. And so he did, because Sandlot's a big movie in our house. And so like, I'm trying to integrate everything that I'm doing. My oldest son is playing lacrosse, and I'm the team photographer because that's something I need to be involved with. And the balance thing is actually an interesting conversation. Most people look at it as some state that we reach, like I've reached balance. I look at it more as a verb. It's instead of balance, you're balancing. And an analogy would be like if you surf or snowboard. When you're going down the hill on a snowboard, you're constantly making little pivots based on where you want to turn or based on the slope of the hill or that, tree that's in the way, and I have to adjust, and you're leaning forward and leaning back and side to side. You're constantly moving your feet. Well, that's what we should do in life. It's balancing. So there's going to be seasons of life where it might just be nose to the grindstone. I've written a couple books, for example, and for about 6 months, it's like hammer hard on getting the books written. And maybe the income does suffer a little bit because of that. And then there's other moments, like this is a busy season for my kids. I've got 4 kids and all of them are in sports. So just about every night of the week, I'm at practice or games. On the weekend, I'm at games. And so, yeah, some of work takes a back seat. So it's a constant act of just looking at your circumstances, identifying what your priorities are in the moment, and then making those pivots as needed all the time.
That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. It makes a lot of sense to me. The idea that you're going to arrive at this like nirvana zen state of perfect balance.
Yeah.
It's not that's not real. It's like trying to be happy. Like you can't try to be happy. You can try to have meaning, and then you probably end up finding happiness somewhere in there on accident. But you're not going to find balance, but you're balancing, you're doing something.
Yeah. Happiness is a weird one too, though, for me, because when I think about happiness, what it conjures up for me is this ignorant bliss, like you're sipping Mai Tais on the beach and it's free of conflict. And so you're happy. But I don't know about you. I go on vacation and after about 2 days, I'm like, all right, I'm good. What do we do now? Because I'm interested not in happiness as a pursuit. I'm interested in, I can't remember exactly what you said. I use the term fulfillment. I want to be fulfilled. And fulfillment to me is not the absence of conflict or struggle. It's the ability to overcome it because what you're pursuing is so important, so meaningful to you that you're willing to suffer for it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I cannot get on board with a vacation where I'm sitting around chilling by the pool. It drives me crazy. I feel antsy. I really like thinking about it makes me uncomfortable. I have a reaction to it physically. All the enjoyable travel that I've ever done has centered around like some adventure or accomplishment. And usually a pursuit. It's going to be something that I'm going to work on something while I'm there. And then I feel like, okay, I'm done something. I think a lot of the advice that exists out there in the ether really centered on like being and existing. And, that's why when people focus on happiness, they're talking about this thing that they just want to have and possess, versus focusing on what do I need to do in order to get that feeling? What do I need to be doing? And if I'm always doing that, I'm probably going to end up being fine. How do I be fit? Right. Well, how do you develop a lifestyle where you're always active? That's a more attainable pursuit. What do you think the biggest problems are that the men that you work with are facing?
Well, definitely lack of purpose and meaning is a big one. I mean, since we're on that subject anyways, that is something that so many guys are contending and struggling with. And that's why they have to use mechanisms to escape, is because they just don't have the purpose and fulfillment that they want to have. And it's really interesting because the way that most people talk about purpose is they act as if one day they're just going to stumble across it. Like, the clouds will part and the doves will descend from heaven and the angels will be trumpeting and singing hallelujah. Here's your purpose in life. And it hasn't happened like that for me. I've had to develop and build and cultivate my purpose. I'll give an example. So to go back to my previous years as a financial advisor, I actually started a podcast when I was at the last kind of stages of me owning that firm. And it was called Wealth Autonomy. So my practice revolved around helping medical professionals with their finances primarily. That was a big part of our business model. So I called this Wealth Autonomy, and I did about 20 episodes, 15, 20 episodes, and realized very quickly that I love the medium of podcasting. I fell in love with it quickly, but it was just an idea. I'm like, oh, this would be fun. I'll talk about different things. And then my clients and prospects, I'll send them links to whatever I'm talking about. And I remember I had this guy, he was a pediatric physician from Pennsylvania. And he called me up and he's like, hey, I need to get some disability insurance. And then he proceeded to rattle off all of the features that he needed with his disability insurance. Now, most people don't know anything about disability insurance, like a thing, but he knew everything. So I thought, okay, well, this guy's either shopping around, which is fine, that's fine.
Yeah.
Or he's not a doctor, he's an advisor and he's trying to like get information. That was immediately my two thoughts.
Yeah.
So I told him, I said, well, look, doc, you know a lot about disability insurance. Like, are you in the market? Like, how do you know so much about disability insurance? And I'll never forget what he said. He said, well, I just listened to your podcast on disability insurance and wrote down everything you told me I needed in a policy.
Whoa.
I was like, oh, got it. Okay. Yeah. And that's when I realized when you are sharing information, people are absorbing that and you have credibility just because you're on air, essentially. It's very interesting. But I realized, to go back to the purpose thing, and I got off on a little tangent there, but I realized quickly I love the medium of podcasting, but I wasn't really wanting to have that same financial conversation that I'd had for almost a decade at that point. And I decided to pivot. And that's when Order of Man was born. In 2015, I started Order of Man. And from the very first episode, we did more downloads on the first episode of Order of Man than we did ever with Wealth Autonomy. And it took off quickly. And I only did it as something to have fun with. It was like, oh, I want to have conversations about being a man. I could interview successful men, guys I'm motivated, inspired by, things that I want to learn. It was just a hobby. It was just something I did for fun. But it ended up becoming a passion of mine. But I never would have found that out if I wasn't willing to start the podcast as in my financial planning practice. And then I never would have found that out if I wasn't willing to try something new. And it's just like turning over rocks. You're gradually just turning things over, things that you're interested in. You don't even have to have a reason for doing it. If there's something that you've always been interested in, just take one step. For example, if you're listening to this and you're like, I've always wanted to hunt. I've never been hunting before. I want to learn how to do that. And you call up a friend that hunts and you say, hey, can I just tag along with you? He's going to take you, of course, and he's going to teach you. That hunting might become a passion. You might end up traveling the world looking for adventure and hunts and everything else. That might be a passion for you if you're willing just to do the first thing. Alternatively, you might say, I actually don't like that. I'm not going to do that again. Well, cool. At least now you know, and you can go explore something else. So I always tell guys, if there's any level of interest in something, then you should try it. You should just take the first step without any preconceived notion about what it's going to be and just see where it takes you.
Yeah, you have to be willing to take the first step, not knowing how this is going to end. A lot of people
and not
want even
to know. Caring.
Yeah, not even having an attachment to how it's going to turn out. A lot of people, they feel like they need to know exactly how it's going to pan out before I can't really start that business because I don't know how much I'm going to be making. Well, you're never going to know that. So I guess you're never going to start that business.
Which is what most people do.
Yeah. How do you help people? Are there practical things that men can do to find that purpose and fulfillment? Because it's a lot of it sounds like, and I definitely agree and resonates with me, awareness and pursuit and a way that they approach individual decisions. But is there something practical as far as self-awareness that men need to do in order to be primed to explore that purpose and meaning and fulfillment?
Yeah, I developed, when I started doing this, I developed a system that was helping me build my financial planning practice, and I turned it into something a little bit more robust that covered more, and it's called the battle plan. And so the way that this works is the first exercises that we encourage men to do are start visualizing what they want in their life in 4 key areas. So The first area is what we call calibration. It's getting your mental, emotional, and spiritual health in check. And then we have connection, which is the relationships with other people, condition, which is your physical condition, and then contribution, which is learning how to become a man of value. So we teach how to create vision. And that's what I would say the first thing that you need to do, because that's what's going to start breeding intentionality.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the friendships that we had earlier, one of the things that it got me thinking about is how often we're surrounded in relationships by what I would just call default relationships. Like, I went to school with that guy. Oh, that guy was in my, in college. I met that guy in the fraternity. That's my neighbor, so we hang out. And there's no intentionality behind it at all. It just happens to be a default relationship just because of proximity. It's not a great way to pick friends. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, so we teach our guys, okay, let's start thinking about what you want in those key areas. And then from there, we have guys come up with objectives, just one per quarter. So if it's calibration, for example, that's, again, getting right with your mental, emotional, and spiritual health. You might say, well, you know what? I actually this quarter would just like to have a closer relationship with God. Cool. How are you going to do it? Well, I'm going to read the scriptures every day for 30 minutes every single day for the next 90 days. That's awesome. And then at the end of that 90 days, we look at it and we say, okay, how do you feel? What did that conjure up any thoughts? Was it exciting? Was that interesting? Did it make you a better person? This is what we call an after action review. And a lot of guys are like, yeah, that did make me a better person. It's so much so that I just started this devotional app that I've been looking at, and I'm going even deeper than I was before. Great. Other guys might say, yeah, it made me a better person, but I think I'll continue to read the Bible, but I don't need to delve deeper than I am currently. And that's fine too. Or another one might be, if in your condition, again, your physical health, you might say, man, I'd really like to lose 20 pounds over the next 90 days. Great. That's a good goal for a lot of people. How are you going to do that? I don't know. My buddy, he's fit. He does martial arts. I think I'm going to start training jiu-jitsu. Cool. So now you're going to go 2-3 days a week and you're going to go train jiu-jitsu, and you're going to lose weight. And you're going to become more proficient. You're going to learn how to protect yourself and other people. At the end of the 90 days, you might say, yeah, I didn't really like it, but I think I'm going to try running now. Or you might say, I really liked it so much so that I'm training for my first jiu-jitsu competition. So it all starts with a vision, and then we work backwards into what you should be doing on a daily basis with things that are interesting to you.
That's good. Final question. What's your top decision-making tip for business owners, Ryan?
There's a lot. Here's what I would say. Find somebody who's doing what you want to be doing and let them guide you. That's like, somebody's already done it and you don't know what you should be doing. So find somebody who has what you want, ask them about it. And if they suggest something to you, put some emphasis into that. They're doing it. They know better than you. So that's what I would do. That's what I do. I hire coaches and advisors and counsel because people know more than me, and I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, that's perfect. Where can people connect with you and the Order of Man?
Orderofman.com is our website, so you can check it out there. Or since you're listening to a podcast, we've got our podcast. We just celebrated 3 or 4 days ago our 10-year anniversary, which is wild to think about. And I think at this point we've done just under 1,600 episodes in the last 10 years. So it has been a crazy ride, and you're bound to find something that you like out of our podcast, and probably bound to find something you don't like or agree with too. So we've got it all.
Cool. Thanks for being here, man. We had a lot in common, more than I thought. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I do too. Thanks for the great conversation, the opportunity to share with you guys.
My takeaway from our conversation with Ryan today is his advice on mentorship. He was able to find a mentor and simply follow their lead, and it took him to a place that he wanted to be in life. And a lot of times I look back in my life and like, I had opportunities to do that. Maybe I let my pride and ego get in the way and think I had a better idea than this person whose advice I had originally sought. When it happens to me and I'm the mentor and people don't follow the advice that they ask me for, it frustrates me. So I think on both ends, one is I can really filter out in the future people who are serious about improving the area of life that they've come to me to help with. And then making sure I'm open to always having that mentor in my life to improve in the areas that are important to me.
You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision by subscribing to the show and leaving us a review wherever you're listening. We appreciate the support. It helps business owners like you find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com, on Instagram at decidedlypodcast, or grab a copy of Sanger and Sean's books from the links in the show notes. Finally, we'd like to thank Shelby Peterson of Transcend Media for editing and post-production of the show. Thanks for listening. I'm Morgan, your producer, and this is Decidedly.